65% of Americans believe life continues to exist even after the body is dead. 15% of the population had some kind of a near-death experience or an out-of-body experience. And 9% of them said in that experience they perceived a divine being or multiple divine beings. If there is a divine soul that exists within the material body, why is it that the gadgets of science are unable to conclude the existence of an entity called the soul in the body? If there is a divine soul that exists within the material body, we should be able to perceive it through scientific instruments. Why is it that the gadgets of science are unable to conclude the existence of an entity called the soul in the body? The reason is that these instruments are material. Consider, for example, if I were to ask you to close your ears and listen to what I am saying, would you be able to do it? You would say, Swamiji, words are a subject of the ears, and through the eyes we can see. So these senses have their limitations. The eyes cannot hear. The ears are unable to see. Likewise, the soul is non-material, while the instruments of science are all material, and hence they are unable to perceive the existence of the soul. Nevertheless, even though science is still debating on its existence, studies have shown that the vast majority of humankind accepts the non-material. George Gallup Jr. published his findings of his survey of the American society in 1981 in his book Adventures in Immortality, where he stated that 65% of Americans believe life continues to exist even after the body is dead. Not only that, 15% of the population had themselves had some kind of a near-death experience or an out-of-body experience. And 9% of them said in that experience they perceived a divine being or multiple divine beings. However, even more spectacular was the statement of Dr. Brian Weiss, the famous author of the book Many Lives, Many Masters. Dr. Brian Weiss said that in the hospital where he was the chairman of psychiatry, in the cardiology ward was a woman who fainted unconscious due to a cardiac arrest. Now, in the cardiac arrest, the blood flow stops to the brain, so she went into a coma, and the staff was endeavoring to resuscitate her. In the meantime, her life force left the body and moved to the edge of the room. Present there, she was witnessing the goings-on. The resuscitation attempt was successful and her life force re-entered the body. A few days later, she related to the surgeon the goings-on in the operation theatre. The surgeon said, "Madam, you were hallucinating because your brain was not really working. but she related a particular episode. She said during the surgery, the surgeon's pen fell from his pocket and rolled over to the side where she was present. The surgeon admitted to the incident. Even more remarkable was the fact that in real life this lady had been blind since birth. There was no question of her witnessing what had happened. But in the state of coma, her life force had been able to see what was going on. And while the body was in that state of pain, she herself was free from that pain. An even more spectacular experience was related by a scientist who had been atheistic at one stage, Dr. Ibn Alexander. He went to med school in UNC at Chapel Hill and then did his MD in neurology from the famous Duke University. And subsequently, he was a practicing neurosurgeon at the Harvard Med School, where he wrote 150 scientific papers and presented them in 200 conferences around the world. This eminent and competent neuroscientist did countless neurosurgeries, and very often his patients would relate the out-of-body experiences they had during the surgery, which he would dismiss as a hallucination. He would say, "Look, because of the lack of blood flow to your brain, it was distressed and created this hallucination which you are relating to me." However, everything turned around in his belief systems in 1954, when Dr. Ibn Alexander himself contracted a nerval virus, as a consequence of which his neocortex completely shut off. The neocortex is the region of the brain responsible for thought and emotions. Now it has shut off. Imagine a television set, the plug of which you pull out from the socket. There is no question of the TV working any further. He remained in coma for 7 days. But during those 7 days, he had divine experiences. And finally, when the doctors operating on him were about to give him up as dead, he popped back to life and then wrote about those experiences in his book called Proof of Heaven. So all these personal experiences of scientists, they indicate that the life force doesn't owe its origin to the physical body or the brain. The Vedic scriptures explain that consciousness is originating from the soul within. Let me read about it to you from my latest book, Spiritual Secrets from Hinduism. The most compelling evidence of the existence of the soul is consciousness, the presence of life in the body. All matter that constitutes our body is lifeless. Hence, the body by itself cannot be the reason for life. Science realizes this paradox and is grappling to explain the phenomenon of consciousness. If matter could be manipulated to create consciousness, then scientists would do the same in laboratories. However, nobody has ever succeeded in creating life from matter. Philosophers therefore continue to debate over the origin of consciousness. The Vedas explain that life or sentience originates from the soul. As long as the Atma is present in the body, the brain, heart, kidneys and liver continue to work. Once it departs, the organs are still there, but all functions cease. The body is now deemed dead. Hence, consciousness or life comes from the soul. One may ask, where in the body does the soul exist? The Upanishads answer that. Hridi hi eva atma, says the Prashnopanishad. The soul resides in the region of the heart. The Chandogya Upanishad states, Sava esha atma hridi. And the Kathopanishad endorses Abhyupagamat hridihi. But its presence in the region of the heart does not mean that it is coupled with the heart. Otherwise, in the case of a heart transplant, the soul would also leave the body. It is merely in that region. Somebody may again question that if the soul is in the region of the heart, how is it able to spread its symptom, the life force, throughout the body? The Brahma Sutra explains Gunat Alokavat. It states, look at the light source. It is residing there, but its light is coming all the way here in the room. While residing in one place, it is able to spread its light through the room. Likewise, the soul exists in the region of the heart, but it pervades consciousness throughout the body. And that is why, if you were to prick your finger, it would pain. Ah, what happened? My finger is paining. How come? This finger has got life and the soul is in the heart? Well, the soul has the ability to enliven the entire body. Now, the fact that the body is mortal and the soul is immortal is the reason for the phenomenon of rebirth. And let's come to our own world-famous story of rebirth as related in the Srimad Bhagavat Puran of King Bharat through his 3 lives. King Bharat was a righteous and just ruler, but he became detached from his duties and finally handed over the kingdom to his children and went into the forest to practice austerities and elevate his soul. However, he saw an incident where a female pregnant deer was about to give birth when a lion saw it and roared. The roaring of the lion startled the mother deer, who was on the side of a stream. It jumped over the pebbles and rocks and fell on the other side, delivering the baby fawn into the water. In the process, the mother died. King Bharat, who was now residing as a hermit, saw the innocent baby deer floating in the water and was moved to pity. But that pity became the cause of his bondage. He lifted the fawn and started taking care of it. Slowly, it grabbed his heart and he developed deep attachment. He would feed it, keep looking at it and pass comments. Look how it loves me. Look at the way it sees me. As the deer grew and would go out to feed in the forest, he would keep waiting and worrying, I hope nothing has happened to it. One day the deer was now big and it departed for 2 full days. And Bharat could only think of the deer. His contemplation of the divine had now finished. Finally, after 2 days, he was frantic and went here and there. And while searching for the deer, he fell off a cliff onto a stream where he saw the deer sitting. Looking at the deer, he departed from his body. The Bhagavad Gita states, Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tyajatyante kalevaram tam tamevaiti kaunteya sada tad bhava bhavita. Arjun, wherever your consciousness is attached at the time of death, that shall determine your destination in your next life. So poor Bharat was now born as a deer. Usually people don't have remembrance of their past lives, but because of his previous spiritual elevation, he did remember and regretted the mistake. He thought, I had renounced my kingdom to go into the forest and practice sadhana, and yet my attachment to the deer resulted in my downfall. So, as a deer, he now frequented the hermitages of sages in the forest and led his life there, absorbing their divine vibrations. Finally, at the end of the life, he cried out to God. And in his next life, he was born in the family of a pious Brahman. There, he pretended to be insane a person so that his relatives would not harass or trouble him. Finally, they rejected him and he was happy for it and went to reside in the forest. That is where he met King Rahugan. Raja Rahugan had been inspired by the desire for spiritual quest and was on his way to go and meet Kapil Muni in Ganga Sagar. He was accompanied by his royal servants and they came to a stream where he was made to sit on a palanquin. One carrier was short. He asked his servants to go and find someone. The servants discovered Bharat, who in this life now was called Jad Bharat. He was of stout body, a young man. They brought him over and made him lift the palanquin of King Rahugan. However, Jad Bharat, being of spiritual elevation, practiced non-violence, and while walking, he would carefully observe that his feet would not fall on an insect. That is why he would sometimes displace his step to the right and sometimes to the left. Consequently, the king's palanquin started rocking, which annoyed the regent, who said, "What is wrong with all of you? Why can't you lift it properly?" The servants pointed to Jad Bharat and said, "O king, it's his fault." Rahugan looked at Jad Bharat and ridiculed this emaciated person. He doesn't have the strength to lift it. Now, Jad Bharat was neither lean nor emaciated, but he did not mind it because he did not look on himself as the body. When the problem became too much, Raja Rahugan then shouted out, "Stop!" And he spoke to Jad Bharat and said, "What is wrong with you? Why can you not lift the palanquin well?" At that time, Jad Bharat, out of compassion for Rahugan, spoke spiritual wisdom. He said, "O king, you said that I am lean, but you are referring to the body. I am not the body. And secondly, you have asked me why I cannot lift it properly. Well, that is not my dharma or not my duty. I am the divine soul. You are looking on me as the servant. However, the soul is on a journey of transmigration many lifetimes. In many times, you yourself have been the servant. Whom should we consider master and whom should we consider serf? If you still choose to look on me as the servant, I will willingly fulfill your instructions." Rahugan was taken aback by that statement, and he observed the tej, the glow on the face of Jat Bharat, and said, "O sage, who are you? I am not scared of anything in this world, but I am scared of offending the saintly people." Jat Bharat took the opportunity to enlighten Rahugan with divine wisdom. He explained Kshetra and Kshetragya, the difference between the field and the knower of the field. He explained that the knower of the field is the soul, while the field of activities is the body. The soul, transmigrating in the cycle of life and death, is bound to material consciousness by the mind. He gave the analogy of the wick of a candle which is not burning properly, thereby producing black smoke. On the other hand, you have a proper cotton wick in clarified butter which burns with minimal smoke. Likewise, when the mind is impure, the soul identifies with its material personality. If the mind can be purified, one will then be able to distinguish the pure self from this body and mind contraption. And for that, the mind should be purified by attaching it at the lotus feet of the Supreme Divine Personality. Rahugan felt illumined, enlightened, grateful. He offered his prostrate obeisance to the great sage Jat Bharat, and then did not continue to meet Kapil Muni, rather went to practice his own spiritual sadhana. Our scriptures are replete with the knowledge of the soul, which is the basis of consciousness in this body. We will continue in our endeavor to understand the self and its elevation towards the supreme goal in this series on spiritual secrets from Hinduism.
Who am I? What is the purpose of life? How can I connect with the divine? Find answers to these profound questions and many more with Swami Mukundananda's latest masterpiece, Spiritual Secrets from Hinduism. Join us on the Radha Krishna Bhakti app for an exclusive 30-day challenge that promises to transform your life one lecture at a time. Dive into the wisdom of Vedic knowledge through beautifully summarized lectures, where every takeaway unveils a path to greater understanding. Engage with interactive activities and test your grasp of spiritual concepts, an essential step towards your spiritual progress. Receive daily inspirational quotes from Swamiji himself and let his words guide you on this journey of self-discovery. Sign up for free and earn participation points with each step you take. Embark on your transformative journey today. Hurry! Register now and be a part of something truly divine. Only on the Radha Krishna Bhakti app, your spiritual companion.